news right now. This is Carolina Carolla Mispidio. I welcome the viewers of Freedom. Let's move on to the news. Russian troops shelled the Dnipropetrovsk region. The enemy attacked Nikopol with FPV drones. The outskirts of Synelnykove were attacked using strike drones. As a result, 2 private houses, a car, and a gas pipeline were damaged. In the Zaporizhzhia region, the Russian army shelled a fire and rescue unit. Buildings and equipment were damaged. The personnel were in shelter and were not injured. Russian occupiers launched an Iskander-M ballistic missile and 72 strike drones at Ukrainian territory. And as reported by the command of the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Ukrainian air defense managed to neutralize 63 Russian drones in the north, south, and east of the country. The air attacks were repelled by aviation, anti-aircraft missile troops, electronic warfare, and drone units, as well as mobile fire groups of Ukraine's defense forces. Ukraine's defense forces struck the Saratov oil refinery. This information was confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The refinery supplied fuel and other resources for the needs of the Russian army. In addition, a drone storage site at the Saky airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea was also hit. Air defense facilities, a hangar with Orion and 4-post drones were destroyed. The command and control tower and a military truck were also hit. Additionally, areas where enemy personnel were concentrated and fuel depots in Donetsk and Luhansk regions were attacked. The Ukrainian armed forces stopped the Russian advance near Huliaipole. According to the Defense Forces of southern Ukraine, in recent days, Russian troops have managed to make some advances in this direction. However, the situation has now stabilized. In recent days, the enemy's advance was stopped by the soldiers of the 33rd Separate Assault Regiment and adjacent mechanized units. Currently, the front near Huliaipole is under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces. This was reported by the Defense Forces of southern Ukraine. In total, 247 combat engagements were recorded on the front over the past day. This was reported by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Russian occupiers attacked the positions of the defense forces in the Huliaipole direction 20 times. There were 29 enemy assaults each on the Oleksandrivka and Lyman sectors of the front. On the Konstantinivka sector, the Russian army carried out 31 attacks. On the most intense Pokrovsk direction, Russian units attempted 59 assault actions. Since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russian army losses have exceeded 1,170,000 troops. These figures were announced by the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. Just in the past day, the defense forces eliminated 1,100 Russian occupiers. Also, in one day, 7 tanks, 15 armored vehicles, 21 artillery systems, and 48 units of enemy automotive and other equipment were destroyed. Ukraine and the Czech Republic discussed the supply of artillery shells. This was reported by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The Ukrainian team held a meeting with the top leadership of the Czech Defense Cooperation Agency. The parties focused on the ammunition initiative and discussed delivery timelines, as well as available quantities for priority calibers. The Ministry of Defense noted that Ukraine needs longer-range munitions as they give Ukrainian servicemen an advantage on the battlefield. All Ukrainian nuclear power plants have fully restored their capacity after Russian attacks. This was stated in a statement by the International Atomic Energy Agency. Electricity production at the power units of the Khmelnytsky, Rivne, and South Ukrainian nuclear power plants has been largely restored. Game Director Magatera Felgrossi stated that the agency will send a mission to inspect several critically important substations. Damage to them could seriously affect the operation of nuclear power plants and nuclear safety. This will be the agency's 6th such mission.
Almost all power units are now operating at full capacity. Only one unit remains at reduced capacity. In addition, all high-voltage power lines that were damaged during the attacks have been restored. Rafael Grossi, Director General of the IAEA, from a statement by the International Atomic Energy Agency.
The European Commission has called on Western partners to speed up payments to Ukraine. This concerns the G7 loan of $50 billion. This was stated by European Commissioner for Economy Valdis Dombrovskis. According to him, this may be enough to cover Ukraine's financing needs in the first quarter of next year. The European Commission is holding negotiations with other international donors in the UK, Canada, Japan, and the US. The EU has already provided its share of the loan, over 18 billion euros, but about 14 billion from other countries remain unpaid. At the same time, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that he also considers the use of frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine to be the most urgent issue and hopes for a swift agreement on this matter within the European Union.
We are trying to find a joint solution within the European Union. Before the last council meeting, I proposed using such a loan secured by Russian assets to finance Ukraine over the next 3 years. I see an increasingly urgent need for this. Ukraine needs our support. Russia's attacks are intensifying. Winter's approaching. Or rather, we are already in the winter period. And that is why I hope we can find a joint solution within the European Union.
More than 400 Ukrainian children are planned to be taken by the Russians from the temporarily occupied territory of the Zaporizhia region and sent to the Yaroslavl region of the Russian Federation. This was reported by the Center for National Resistance. According to analysts, the occupiers present this as supposed excursions and sports competitions. But in reality, this is the controlled relocation of minors deeper into Russia. Moreover, parents have no way to influence the trick. The Russians do not allow international organizations and do not provide any legal grounds.
This is not tourism. This is a way to separate children from their families, immerse them in the Russian information space, and create conditions for further assimilation. Russia disguises the removal of children under the slogan of cultural exchange. But the essence is the same: the systematic relocation of Ukrainian minors to regions of Russia under its control. From a message by the Center for National Resistance on Telegram.
Lithuania has notified the Council of Europe of its decision to join the Special Tribunal on the crime of aggression by Russia against Ukraine. This decision reflects our unwavering support for Ukraine, our commitment to the UN Charter, and our firm belief that justice requires accountability, the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement. The aggressor must be held accountable for its crimes, Kyiv's partners are convinced. My colleague, Victoria Chistihina, will cover this topic in more detail.
Russia will not be able to avoid responsibility for the crimes committed in Ukraine. After a round of negotiations in Geneva, the Ukrainian delegation managed to reach a number of fundamental agreements. An important step was the removal of the amnesty provision from the draft peace plan proposed by the Donald Trump administration, said Ukraine's ambassador to the United States, Ola Stefanishina.
I can say unequivocally that the issue of amnesty is not included in the final 19 points. That point is not there because it is extremely controversial and concerns the issue of justice.
Mass killings of civilians, the abduction of Ukrainian children, torture, and extrajudicial executions of prisoners of war. The crimes of the Russian occupying army must not go unpunished. According to the Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion, more than 190,000 war crimes committed by citizens of the aggressor country have been registered. The Office of the Prosecutor General of Ukraine asserts that the scale and systematic nature of Russia's crimes allow them to be classified as part of a deliberate genocidal policy against the Ukrainian people.
As an international lawyer, I understand the price of compromise when facing an aggressor state like the Russian Federation. Territorial integrity, the sovereignty of the country, and the responsibility of the aggressor must not be up for negotiation. Refusing to hold them accountable is not peace. It's an invitation to a new war. Irina Mudra, deputy head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, in an interview with Ukrinform agency.
Kyiv's partners also insist on the inevitability of punishment for war criminals. A significant step toward justice should be a reparations loan for Ukraine, secured by frozen Russian assets. The European Parliament has called on EU member states to adopt and implement the mechanism without unnecessary delays. The European Parliament resolution on the draft peace plan and the EU's participation in achieving a just and lasting peace for Ukraine states that the peace agreement must provide Ukraine with security guarantees equivalent to Article 5 of the NATO-Washington Treaty, confirm that Ukraine is free to choose its political alliances without any restrictions, and ensure accountability for those responsible for the crime of aggression and war crimes, as well as obligate Russia to compensate Ukraine for all damages.
Any such agreement must guarantee full accountability under international law for crimes of aggression and war crimes committed by Russia, its allies, and its proxy forces against Ukraine and the people of Ukraine before the International Criminal Court and a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. From the resolution of the European Parliament.
Lithuania has officially notified the Council of Europe of its intention to join the special tribunal on the crime of aggression by Russia against Ukraine. If, during peace negotiations, Russia is allowed to redraw Ukraine's borders, then sooner or later it will do the same with Lithuania's territory, said the country's foreign minister.
If we allow borders to be redrawn in any way, even in the smallest form, they'll come to us with a marker and a map, and then with tanks to change them somewhere else. We cannot allow any de jure or de facto legitimization of the occupied territories. Kęstutis Budrys, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lithuania, in an interview with Delphi.
Final decisions on the creation of a special tribunal for the crime of Russian aggression against Ukraine are in the final stage, according to the president's office. The political and legal components of the special tribunal are already in place. The issue of its budget is currently being decided. The process of practical implementation of the decision will begin as early as 2026. Now, let's talk about the kind of influence Putin is trying to exert on the very initiative of peace talks to end Russia's war against Ukraine. And just a little spoiler, it's hardly leading to anything productive. So, Ukraine will not give up its territories for the sake of peace. President Volodymyr Zelensky will not sign any such document. This was stated by the head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak. And according to him, no one should count on Ukraine making concessions on this issue. At the next stage of negotiations, Ukraine is only ready to discuss where the line of contact should be drawn.
As long as Zelensky is president, no one should expect us to give up any territories. He will not sign an agreement to relinquish territories. No one can do this unless they want to go against the constitution of Ukraine and the Ukrainian people. Right now, we can realistically only talk about defining the boundaries of the line of contact. That is what we must do. Andriy Yermak, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, in an interview with The Atlantic.
The local work of the U.S. and Ukrainian delegations on the draft peace agreement will continue at the end of this week. This was announced by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky. He noted that the parties will build on the results achieved in Geneva last weekend.
Right now, defending our positions is equally important. Our resistance on the front lines, and our joint work with partners for better diplomatic positions. And everything is set up for this kind of work. Our team, together with American representatives, will continue this week, at the end of the week, to bring the points we have from the Geneva results closer to a form that will lead us toward peace and security guarantees. There'll be a meeting of the delegations. The Ukrainian delegation will be well prepared and focused on substantive work. We are currently in contact with the American side and with our European friends. I'm also informing our partners in other parts of the world. I thank them for supporting our sovereignty and our state. At the same time, we are doing everything to ensure that Ukraine has sufficient defense support.
The European Parliament has stated that a peace agreement with Russia is only possible if Ukraine receives security guarantees at the level of NATO's Article 5. Holding those responsible for the aggression accountable and ensuring full compensation for damages. This is stated in the resolution that was adopted yesterday in Strasbourg. The document emphasizes that concessions to Moscow are unacceptable, the occupied territories will not be recognized as Russian, and Kyiv has the right to freely choose its alliances. Members of the European Parliament also called on EU countries to create mechanisms for reparations using frozen Russian assets.
Any peace agreement must require Russia to fully compensate Ukraine for all material and non-material damages and losses it has caused. Peace can't be achieved by making concessions to the aggressor. Any such agreement must guarantee full accountability under international law for crimes of aggression and war crimes committed by Russia, its allies, and its puppet forces against Ukraine and the people of Ukraine, before the International Criminal Court and a special tribunal for the crime of aggression. From the resolution of the European Parliament opposition of the EU regarding the proposed peace plan and the EU's participation in achieving a just and lasting peace for Ukraine.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that after any peace agreement with Russia, Ukraine will still need strong armies and clear security guarantees. He emphasized that the issue concerns not only Ukraine, but all of Europe, which is why the guarantees are being discussed jointly with the US and Kyiv. According to Merz, the main thing is that the Ukrainian army is well equipped and capable of defending the country. Europe is proposing that Ukraine should have at least 800,000 military personnel rather than 600,000 as previously discussed. Merz added that any negotiations must start from the current front line.
Ukraine needs strong armed forces. If a peace agreement is ever reached, which we are also working on together at the European level, Ukraine will still need strong armed forces and reliable security guarantees from its partners. Any agreement involving the European Union, European states as a whole, or NATO also requires the approval of European partners or consensus within the alliance.
Meanwhile, Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has arrived at the Kremlin. He has already held a meeting with Putin in negotiations on the Russian side. Also participating were Foreign Minister Lavrov, Deputy Prime Minister Novak, and Putin's aide Shakov. Orban stated that the main goal of the trip is energy security and ensuring energy supplies during the winter period. The Hungarian Prime Minister also said that an initiative to achieve peace in Ukraine would be discussed. In a brief conversation before the start of the talks, Putin said he would be glad to have a possible meeting in Budapest with U.S. President Donald Trump.
Subscribe to The Gaze and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.